Welcome to a new episode of Scary Short Stories. Today, we have stories featuring paranormal events and supernatural entities. Let's begin. Story 1. It was my junior year of high school when I went to a party and played with a Ouija board. At the time, I was big into paranormal stuff, but I didn't know the dangers of using one of those boards. We asked typical questions, but things started to get dark as I saw strange things in my vision. The last question was, how old will I be when I die? Everyone else got traditional numbers, but my answer was different. The board kept bouncing back and forth between 0 and 1. It weirded me out, and I stopped playing. However, a few weeks later, I started sensing a presence. It felt like a protector, but it turned out to be anything but that. Weird things started happening in our home, like drawers opening, whispers, shadows, lights appearing in places where they shouldn't be, and books moving. But at night, things got even worse. The presence would stand in front of my door, and I could feel the fear oozing out of it. I knew it was downright evil. I dealt with this for a couple of years until I met my husband. We got our first home, and things started escalating. We heard footsteps, breathing, and whispers all around us. My husband, who was a practicing Wiccan, blessed our home, but forgot about the porch and outer walls. We heard scratches on the walls, knocking on the door and windows. People saw the entity as a shadow and described it as tall and built like a brick house. My husband tried to banish it, but it didn't go well. One night, he came home extremely pale and sweating after experiencing brake failure on a haunted road. He was going about 60 miles per hour, and the wheel began to jerk out of his hands towards the river. He had to use all his strength to keep the car on the road. At that point, I knew that enough was enough. I started taking my husband to a church that my parents went to, and I gave myself to God. I told the entity that it was not welcome and needed to leave. After that, the haunting stopped. Our home was quiet for the first time in years, and it has remained that way even though I've stopped going to church for the most part. We've moved out of state, and our new home is kind and peaceful. So, from my experiences, I have one piece of advice. Never play with a Ouija board. It nearly cost us our lives in the long run. Story 2. Last December, my world was turned upside down when my mother was hospitalized, leaving me to stay at my sister's house in a spare room located in the basement. The first few nights went relatively smoothly, but on the third night, everything changed. I struggled to sleep and was constantly disturbed by strange noises. The sound of movement was coming from the closet, and it seemed like someone or something was dragging something heavy around in there. The closet was not very big, making it all the more unsettling. As a believer in the paranormal, I have had several encounters in the past. However, I did not want to believe that this was anything supernatural. I was already going through a lot and couldn't bear the thought of dealing with something else. Despite my efforts to ignore the noises, they persisted. Sometimes they would stop for a little while, only to start up again later. At other times, I could hear what sounded like scraping coming from outside the small basement window. It was an eerie sound, almost metallic, like a shovel or some other heavy tool was being used. I eventually drifted off to sleep, but I was soon jolted awake. The room was almost pitch black despite the nightlight being on. That's when I saw him, a very tall man standing in the corner near the window. He was wearing tattered clothes that looked like they had been through a lot, with long, dark hair and a matching beard. His arms were crossed in front of his chest. My heart pounded in my chest as he slowly turned his head and locked eyes with me. It felt like we were staring at each other for an eternity before he suddenly vanished, leaving the room somewhat less dark. When I checked my phone, it was 4 a.m, and I knew I wouldn't be able to go back to sleep. I felt like I was being watched for the rest of the night, even though I didn't see the man again. I eventually told my sister about what had happened, but she was just as scared as I was. She begged me not to tell her husband or daughter, knowing that they wouldn't want to go downstairs ever again. Since that night, I've been back to the basement several times, but haven't seen the man again. I still have no idea who or what he was. But I hope I never have to experience something like that again. Story 3. The house we stayed in had an unusual layout. It was a small 2-bedroom home surrounded by large grounds on the front and back. In the front, we played football and hung out, while in the back, there was a pumpkin patch, a laundry unit, and kennels where 2 dogs were kept. Additionally, there was a small enclosure with a gate on it that was locked with a large padlock. This enclosure piqued our curiosity, and despite our uncle's instructions not to try to get inside it, my brother and I tried to unlock it with no success. On the night of the incident, all of us decided to sleep in the front lawn outside on traditional jute beds called mangies, as there was only one air conditioner, and my grandparents slept in that room. I slept with my brother and 2 cousins on one mangie, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Suddenly, I woke up to see a massive, shadowy figure standing at the foot of our bed, looking straight at me. It was probably 8 or 9 feet tall, and there were no features to this being. No face, no mouth, only an intense darkness where the eye should have been. It was just watching me, and I felt completely paralyzed. I wet my pants out of fear and lay there looking at it for at least 2 minutes until I mustered up the courage to wake my brother up. As soon as he saw the being, he shouted for our mom, waking up the whole family. In a flash, the entity bolted towards the back of the house, and we could only see its long shadow visible in the dim moonlight and the little bit of lighting outdoors. My dad and uncle ran after it, and the rest of us followed. When we arrived, we found the door to the enclosure wide open, and the padlock was on the floor. Inside was an unmarked grave, which my dad and uncle explained belonged to a local elder. They also revealed that the locals requested to keep the grave locked at all costs, as there was a dwelling of jinns present to guard it. Our attempts to unlock the gate disturbed the entity and led to this paranormal occurrence. Although I am not particularly religious, this incident has always shaken me up, as I have never been able to rationalize it. I was only 8 years old at the time, while my brother was 13. Our uncle, who was a major in the armed forces, was posted with his family in a small town called Pano Akil in southern Pakistan. As it was summer break, my family and I were invited to stay with our uncle for a week, which was a great opportunity for us to catch up with our cousins and spend quality family time together. Story 4. When I was in primary school, my grandma lived near a cane field. During school holidays, my mom would take us down to visit her, and I would stay at my grandma's house while my cousins would come over to visit me. We thought we were cool because we would be left home alone at night while our grandma worked and our parents went out drinking. One of my cousins smoked, so she would go outside to smoke by the boundary, which was directly across the road to the cane field. One night, she came back inside, sobbing, telling us that there was something crouched behind a bin in the yard and it growled at her. Her sister and I thought it was probably a dog, so we went outside to chase it away. However, whatever it was, wasn't a dog. We could see part of this white thing hiding behind the bin, and my dumb self confidently walked up to it thinking it was a scare-lost dog. But as I got closer, I could hear this growling that sounded nothing like a dog. I saw a white knee and realized that this thing was crouching on 2 legs. It was white, with no hair, long limbs, skinny and humanoid. The closest I can describe it is the rake. It stood up briefly and made this defensive yell, where I covered my face. My cousin screamed, and the thing bounded away on all fours back into the cane field. We told our parents when they got home, but they joked it was probably the landowners' inbred son that they let out at night. Because of their underreaction, we forgot about it over time. However, when we told our grandma one time, she said that one evening when she and her boyfriend were reversing out, she took a wrong turn or hit something, and they both got out. This white thing was laying flat by the cane field, as if it was trying not to be seen. It crouched down lower when they looked at it, and because it terrified them, they pretended not to see it as well, then slowly crept back into the car pretending it wasn't there. During my early high school years, when my mother would take me to see my cousins and uncle, I saw glimpses of it mainly at night. Although you could sense an eerie feeling from the cane field during the day, I started doing this thing where I would walk around at night, listening to my iPod, so when at my grandma's house, I was wandering around the yard when it crawled out from under my grandma's house, then ran back into the field. I would see glimpses of it from behind bushes or peeking out of the cane at night. So I stopped going outside at night. Whatever it was didn't try to attack us, though it seemed to like chilling at my grandma's house. My grandma often worked at night, so I think it went there to sleep or observe things. Then it didn't realize me and the other meddling kids were going to find it or notice it. I don't know where it came from or what it wanted, but according to my grandma, the town was near a rainforest with several caves around, so it speculated that it would come down when the cane was up to venture around the town.